Here we go. Hello, loyal listeners. Welcome to another episode of Steve and Lynda Make a Podcast. Steve and Lynda are off this week, but we're here to fill in. And I spoke to them the other day. They said they've been listening, keeping track. They said they hate everything that we've done with their franchise, but
can you blame them?
No.
We've only had 1 week and we've ruined it.
Probably didn't even take the full episode, huh?
They tuned out as soon as things about trebuchets started coming in.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so they got through half.
They're good people.
Catapult people.
So this week we decided what we would do is to sort of deepen the conversation about the projects that we're working on. So last week we had our sort of intro into what the projects are for each of us. We'll rehash those things a bit, but in pursuit of keeping you all updated and sort of keeping ourselves accountable to each other, we this week are going to talk about just where things stand for us. So we'll talk about a bit of this sort of decision making that's been going on this week for each of us, some of the steps that we've taken to further our pursuit of world domination, and we'll sort of clarify to everyone what exactly are the sort of meat and potatoes of each of the projects that we work on, because I think our projects span a pretty wide set of endeavors, and I think each one has its own sort of barriers of understanding. So some of the things that we're working on may not necessarily be understood by everyone, and I think we'll just basically get a sense from each other. You guys hear the sirens?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear the sirens.
We're making a podcast here. I hope everyone's okay. All right. So to dive in, how about this? I'll pick and choose, like a teacher calling on students. So.
Oh, I much prefer popcorn reading.
Ooh.
We can't sit here for 2 days in silence, though.
Right.
What if we all popcorn Ian each time?
Ooh, I take it back.
Is popcorn reading, is that popular? Does everybody know what that is? Has everybody had such a great experience with that as we might have had?
Listeners, write in and discuss their experience with popcorn reading. Yeah, Dan, everyone went to elementary school.
Look, dude, I don't know. I know I hated popcorn reading with a passion.
I'll be honest, when I first heard of the concept, it sounded a lot more nutritious, and I was let down. I didn't enjoy the outcome at Barkley Elementary.
If I had run for student government, it would have been on the platform that popcorn reading would be
abolished.
Under attack.
What's the fear? We'll get into the details eventually, but let's track this one down. What's the big problem, Dan?
Your fate is in the hand of your peers. Do you know what that means? Have you met your peers? It's fucking terrifying.
Have you had popcorn? Still missing some of the fundamental.
Yeah, do you understand what popcorn reading is, Parker?
No. I think we're talking about two different things right now, and I'm comfortable with what I know. So that's
I'm picturing like little.
He said he's comfortable, Brendan.
I'm just standing in front of the microwave right now, just like it's gonna happen, but it never happens.
Don't stand too close to the microwave. All right.
Head first.
Let's see. So, Parker, why don't you start us off? Update us on basically what did you get accomplished this week?
So this week, still jumping into like the graphics and branding kind of stuff. I kind of I'm wrapping things up with the beer garden murals that I'm working on. I got some directional feedback from the project manager there, so I'm going to be installing the last mural there. So that'll be coming to a close probably in the next couple weeks. It's bittersweet because I think that it's getting a little bit cold to be painting outside. So I'm pretty excited for that to be done with, but I'm also excited to see how that all looks like with those 4 bays painted and everything like that. And then other than that, I have some things coming down the pipeline. Got some branding project in Phoenixville, which is like I'm super excited for. Yeah, I know. It's like down. I don't want to name any names yet, but should be for a restaurant that's opening up pretty soon. Logos are always really exciting to me, so that's I don't know. I think that's like that whole visual identity part is going to be pretty cool. And then I also got one of my old coworkers reached out about another coworker needing some help with like some social media graphics and things like that. So might be touching base with them early next week. And that, again, it sounds pretty legit. Little do you guys know that I might know what I'm doing. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Definitely sound like what you're doing.
How much of gathering those projects is actually requiring kind of the initiative of you versus how much of it is more passive, just like generally having your name out there? How much legwork did you have to do to especially for these 2 new projects that you're going to start on?
So like the word of mouth thing, I always, I don't know, you hear people being like, yo, network. That's so important. But like, yeah, absolutely network. And just like, I think generally just not being a dick when you meet people, don't like, I don't know. I think you can like, cause I don't know.
That helps.
I think when I think when I meet somebody, I'm like pretty timid and kind of like to myself until I like get to know them, and then like you can kind of like let the personalities fly and stuff like that. But I think that like just like even I don't know, with like the job that I'm like working with through one of my old coworkers, like next week, I didn't really know the coworker that needs the help, the like coworker that was referenced. Like I wasn't like close with them at all, but like just like I think like the whole like Parker's a good guy, like they don't really know, they looked at my portfolio and they were like, I'm into that, but I don't think they know anything about me. But I think that like just like knowing that you're not total scumbag. Just like that kind of helps. And then with like the reach out stuff, it was really just like it was like good timing. So like recently I've been like jumping on social media and just like following every single small business in like a 20-mile radius that I know. Yeah, and just
buddy.
like going for it. And like as soon like because of that, like there's like this one like Phoenixville foodie account. And I think that, you know, and
shout
like,
out to them,
shout out
Phoenixville
Foodie. Yeah. But they like
that's
posted
their name.
this picture.
That's their God-given name.
Yeah. Their first name, Phoenixville, last name Foodie. It's an interesting,
Are we trying to get them on?
Oh, yeah, that'd be a great guest. But yeah. But either way, they posted about this restaurant that like is like just they're pretty much just like painting the exterior and being like coming soon, and like on their Instagram they had some like sketches of their logo that they want done. So I was just like, yo, slide into the DMs, and then they were like, hi, and just like, yeah, let's like get together. And so that became, and again, this is the other thing. It was like one of those things where I like get super self-conscious. I like talked to Lily about this for like 3 days in a row. I was like, I reached out last Friday and I was like, yo, I haven't heard anything back. Like, did I come on too strong? Cause I just like, I lay out the whole project and like, this is kind of what like, they asked for like pricing and stuff like that. They're like, I was like, this is what it'll kind of look like, 2-3 rounds of revisions, give you like a mood board, give you like the X, Y, and Z, so you have a business card, stuff like that, and like set a price. And I was like, do you think that I like asked too much off the bat? Like, what if these other people, because I saw like another, like, I guess I'll say competing agency or competing designer in Phoenixville, like also reached out, like commented on their stuff. And they like literally the restaurant had reached out to them and was like, yo, I'll reach out to you like via email. So I was like, fuck, I lost it. Like, I don't know. And then that wasn't the case. They reached out and they were like, yeah, like we'll go over today. So today in like 2 hours, I'm going to be going over what they're looking for. So that's pretty exciting. And that's like one of those like shot in the dark things where you're just like, hey, do you guys need work? And they're like, yeah. So
oof, that's so lucky. Tough. Like,
yeah, it's scary.
That whole set of when your sort of human self-consciousness infiltrates that whole endeavor, because like there's this notion you got to be a professional and like that you have to have the appropriate responses there or the appropriate like language every time you reach out to someone is so tough because there's no fucking rule book for that stuff.
No.
And I was gonna say, does anybody know where that notion comes from? Because like I found that just to be total bullshit.
I think it carries over from like traditional workplaces, well, at least for me, Like I feel like I want to carry that over into the personal stuff from work. And
I think even
I
in
think
work.
it's partly fake, like depending on who you're working with. Obviously, you don't want to like start completely. I don't want to say yourself. You don't want to start like completely, I don't know, lax with a lot of you don't want to lead with a lot of profanity.
Oh no,
or,
yeah.
or
But like you
or
also don't want to
emojis.
show up like a board. You don't want to be like, hey,
Yeah.
like I do this and I'm a robot. Like, and also like reading.
Oh, is
I'm
that
glad
not
you
the
brought
move?
that up, Dan, because like reading off their profile, they're like, oh, like we're from like Montclair and like we like are like like we're locals and blah blah blah. So you kind of want to have that like towny feel. You don't want to be like, I've done X, Y, and Z for this company.
Yeah.
Ha 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 ha. Like I'm ready to help you out, small town plebeian. Like you like no, you want to be like approachable and like friendly and kind of be like, I see you eye to eye. Like, I don't know. It's cool.
And Parker,
Yeah, you want to hit them like a friend. Whereas like
Exactly.
sometimes in the working world, even that's a little too informal, which I think is where that disconnect happens maybe.
yeah.
And it's annoying.
And Parker, for you especially, the stuff that you do is so personal. So like we talked off the air about things like just getting a sense of a person's brand, which is sounded like such a complicated process that includes certainly like a level of expertise and understanding of um, graphic design and the principles of graphic design. But it also seems like you have to be able to read people.
Yeah, completely. No, I agree with that like completely. And that's like a really hard thing because you kind of have to be like, I don't know, you need to have some sort of like psychic abilities as well as, which you don't really need psychic abilities if you just ask like a couple of questions. Like Brendan, when we set you up with like your like what, I don't know, we talked about like adjectives, like how do you want to describe like what you're doing and that kind of thing. And you kind of put those puzzle pieces together and that's where you kind of get your narrative,
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, so just so that listeners know, when Parker and I were talking about creating a logo for my project, working on forest floor mushrooms, he started out by basically saying, okay, so are there some just general ideas or I don't know, yeah, descriptive terms that you would use to just get us started off in some direction, or also you mentioned like send me some things that you um, latch onto, some other logos or images that are out there already, um, which was a great starting point. And then from there it really started to get into a back and forth, which was cool. But I can imagine those first couple of steps are hard. Do you feel like you're good at that, like reading people and seeing more or less who they are or the things that they would like straight off the bat, or does it really require that um, initial direct questioning of like, are there actually explicit words you want to use or explicit color schemes?
I think that part's important. And also like Brendan, it's like, it's, I've known you for, I don't know, 15, I don't know, going on like 20-ish years, like I've known you forever. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've known you back in 1890s. But like, I don't like it's, so that's like different too. Cause it's
Yeah.
like, yeah. And then like, I know nothing about this person that I'm going to be meeting with today, but yeah, you kind of want to like break down those barriers and like, I don't know, already have some sort of rapport. And like it helps that they like kind of know what they want to do, like, and like it, I mean, they're opening a restaurant, so there's so many moving pieces as well, so they kind of, I feel like they have to know, even if they don't know that they know yet, they kind of know what they're looking for. It's one, I don't know, it's tough, but it's, do I think that I'm comfortable with it? Like, fuck no. But like, are emails sometimes an easier way to start a relationship than like face to face? Probably. I don't know, like pretty good time to be in the tech age, but like, I don't know, I think you just make it work. Yeah, man, that's my week.
It's all downhill from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, do you feel encouraged? Is it like one of those good weeks?
It's a good week. I'm gonna actually be like painting tomorrow. So like putting in the last mural, like starting to do that and like tracing at night. So that's like weird because like I don't know, I feel like I've been doing that forever because we're not talking about the pandemic, but the pandemic has just been like a time vortex. Like I don't even know what was 2 months ago or what was last year. But it's like a good week. I think it's always like, I always get those scaries, like working with a new client. Like I'll send over like the first round of stuff, and there have been times where you completely don't hit it. So like, it's going to be one of those things where like that's like, you hope that the psychic stuff works out. Cause like you hope that you send them some stuff that they really want to see. And it's not like, oh, these first like 10 hours or whatever, or 5 hours, whatever you worked on these logos, like that was all for naught, So yeah, it's a mixture of the two, but that's why.
How do you tell when they're so lukewarm about something? Like, what is the what's the feedback that makes you reach that conclusion?
Oh man, it's apparent. Well, you realize you're pretty much like, I don't know, if you made them if you make somebody a sweater, okay, and they pay you for a sweater. Yeah,
analogies.
The classic sweater analogy.
And I don't know, either like, let's say that you make them a sweater and it doesn't fit, or like it's made of, I'm not going to say that. It's made of, I don't know. It's made of,
wool?
What's another thing for, yeah, sure. It's made of like steel wool, and it really didn't quite work out. Like, and you're just ripping those nipples off, like with that chafing. So like, if that's the case, then I don't know. They're going to tell you like, yo, like, I mean, and it's never going to be that. I hope it's never, I like to think nobody would purposefully make a steel wool sweater, but.
Or accidentally even.
Yeah, I mean, if you just accidentally had like 4 pounds of steel wool and you're like, well, let's see. But yeah, with like logos
and that's
and
a great
stuff like
segue into this week's sponsor, Steel Wool Sweaters.
Steel wool, yeah. America Steel Wool Sweaters. I don't know, like they'll tell you. They will tell you either directly or indirectly. Like what I've gotten before is like, I've never like bombed so hard that they were like, okay, we're going to go a different way with a different client. But I have had ones where it's like, oh, we were really thinking like more of this direction, and maybe they'll show at that point. And like that was actually one of the learning moments, is like, you're kind of like, oh, we might be going in this direction. And then they bring in like, I don't know, 2 rounds of talking and everything. Then they bring in their visual DNA, like we were kind of talking about. And I'm kind of like, and that's like a learning thing for me. Like, fuck, I really should ask for that earlier, because then I kind of know like what you want before you see it.
Yeah.
It's never really like, I don't know. It's not like a breakup, but it's like, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Articulate again. Yeah, you mentioned visual DNA. Like, articulate again what exactly that is and how that relates to how you basically start with these designs.
So yeah, it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's like a trick that I learned from. I wouldn't even say a trick. Everybody should be doing it. And everybody probably is doing it if they are a designer, and like not even design, but like pretty much. I don't know. I think like this could like spew into so many other like mediums of creation and stuff like that. Like I'm sure like carpenters do the same thing, contractors should be doing the same thing, where you're pretty much just like pitching ideas. Like you kind of make these mood boards, and you're getting like visual like tie-ins and visual, like, I don't know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like visual affirmations from your client before you even start working. So yeah, those visual sign-offs, it's really it's just really important to get to know what your client wants.
I hear you saying the word psychic, and I think first of all that you're being like humble about that skill, or you're calling it psychic, but I think it genuinely is a skill. And I'll sort of brag on you for a second, just to demystify, I think, like what that is that you're pointing at or suggesting, basically. And that brag is that I think what you're saying is basically you just listen very carefully to people. And I think that's a skill that is really hard to develop, but really important to develop.
And so that's like another thing. Yeah, that probably is totally it. I think that's one of the things that I like kind of got the first year and a half that I was working at Sparks. I would miss some things in projects, like during the briefs and stuff like that. And it literally took like my boss's boss like sat in on me one time. He was like, yo, this other guy who works here, literally, he just writes down everything. And like, you guys remember me in high school, C student, I didn't write down everything. Like I didn't like, that's just not what I did.
Parker.
When you put it that way, C student. So like I didn't write down everything, but like now just literally when like it's just stream of consciousness, like everything that like they say, you do just write it down, then you kind of tie these things together. And yeah, that probably is part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Do you have plans for next week, or do you know, or you have to wait for sort of feedback or like clarity on what these two new things will look like?
So I think with next week with these two new things, it'll probably be the new one. I have to like officially meet with the friend that was like referred to me. I have to meet with them, not like physically, but on like a Zoom call or something on like Monday, and like talk terms and rates and stuff like that. So that'll probably be like early week stuff, and then figuring out like if I'm starting that week or starting whenever. And then with this like logo package or whatever, I think that'll kind of be that if they like the conversation that we have today, then maybe I'll be starting on some first rounds of that, and that should kind of lead into the week. Should keep me a little busy. Yeah.
Nice. It's good to have things to do.
Absolutely.
Dan.
Yeah, Popcorn Dan.
So what have you gotten done this week or last week? Where do things stand with your projects? Have you learned anything new, made new decisions?
Made new friends, killed off old friends, things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am off this week from work, which is glorious and long overdue. So
yeah, we should mention 3 of us are quote unquote unemployed. 1 of us has a full-time job. I think that's an important point for listeners to take away. Like none of this can really be done. I mean, I think it's just a complicated thing to figure out how you weave a full-time job into trying some of these things.
Yeah, I guess maybe I can speak a little to that this week too. Yeah, so let's jump into that now, I guess.
Yeah, sorry,
it's hard. It's very difficult. I feel like for a long time, like many, many years, I've just been lucky enough to have, interest in hobbies and side projects enough to maintain discipline to really spend a lot of nights and weekends on them. And it is difficult because I think some days when you want or sometimes when you need, like increasingly I've needed to spend time on some of these projects as I pick up new gigs and things. Very quickly my weekends became time that was completely mine. I could spend on anything to, in the last couple months, basically, working an 8-hour day on creative projects. And that's awesome, but it is like a go mentality that doesn't relent. And so it feels great to be making progress on some of that creative work, to be gaining those skills. So like, again, for me, like to see some of my photography improve is great. To see some of the videos that I'm making slowly gain, even a little bit of a trickle of traction is awesome. But I think it does come at the expense of probably working too hard.
Yeah.
And I don't beat myself up too much about that though, because at some point you kind of have to do, you shouldn't be in that grind mentality 24/7, but I do feel like this is a phase of life where I decided that I was going to do that a little bit to try and to make some progress on those creative projects. And, looking back over the last year, really when I had stepped some of this stuff up, no regrets so far. The COVID situation has made that mentally tougher above and beyond what it already would have been, for sure.
How do you mean exactly?
It's just, I think in a year like this, it would be great if you could take more time off or more time to yourself or do some other things that aren't necessarily, that don't feel like work or responsibility. Like as much as you like taking, or as much as I like taking photos and video, and how fun it is, it's not the same as like reading a book in the sun for 2 hours or something like that,
Yeah.
And so that's what was cool about having this week off. Very much caught some family over the weekend and then took a little camping trip, a little recharge situation, and was graced by the presence of one of our own, Ian. That was Ian. Ian came with me.
Not three of your own. We weren't invited. Parker and I weren't invited.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it just slipped my mind. I was trying to think of people that I knew that I was close to and that liked camping, and I really could only think of Ian at the time. So
yeah,
didn't invite anybody else. So we slept outside. Some nice good hiking.
Did you guys did you share a tent?
Did we what?
Did you share a tent?
That would be unacceptable in the COVID era. So
I just want to know. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm just the people at home have been asking.
Yeah, they have. So I'll describe my dwelling real quick. I got a little one-person backpacking tent recently. I've logged 4 nights in it. It is lovely.
Ooh.
It is very quick to set up.
It's fancy.
Quick plug.
We'll throw the affiliate link in the description below, and make sure you buy 2 or 3.
Toasty.
But that's working great. And Ian, you had a little bit of an alternative shelter that I was pretty jealous of, even with my brand new tent. You wanna tell us what were you doing?
I went with a nice camping hammock, which was fun. So it's like it's more than just like a yard hammock. Like it's got some netting on the top. It's like enclosed. It's like a little person cocoon. I wouldn't want to sleep in it in weather any colder than this.
But yeah, Dan, since I sort of forced that question, squeezed it inside the other question that
you did.
We were asking,
you wrapped it up in a little Trojan horse.
That's right. It was Inception, a Russian doll of questions. But so if this week, right, you had a bit of time to
so
just
did I do
decompress.
anything? So did I actually get anything done? Is that?
Yeah. If not, what did you do last week? Because it's been 2 weeks.
If not, we can skip it. Yeah. So
if not, no one cares about you having fun, enjoying yourself.
Yeah. So all that relaxation talk is to say. Thank you for keeping me on track. Is that Ian and I were very excited to get back to the internet.
Oh yeah.
And so yesterday made some good progress on just scheduling some of those social posts for the podcast that I'm working with called The Create Unknown, if I haven't mentioned that yet. Also spent some time, I think I mentioned in our last episode, was working on a coffee video, and that was one of the newer things that I was getting into, doing some video work. And so wrapping up final touches on that. And what else did I do yesterday? I think those were the big ones. Obviously, took some photos while we were camping and edited a slew of those. And so that's all kind of slated to go on my personal Instagram as kind of just, a way to throw out some more of those landscape type shots. Not sure how those play into like the business side of things, but I do try to spend a lot of time on my personal Instagram. In terms of just kind of curating a grid and trying to make it look picturesque, playing around with some hashtags and trying to learn a little bit there.
Yeah. Well, to what degree would you treat that as sort of like a portfolio?
105%. So
cool. Next question.
when I'm doing what, like Parker was saying, kind of reaching out to all local businesses in the area and just in one swoop taken over. When I'm kind of doing the same thing, I'm often using my Instagram as my portfolio. And, if that's sometimes for these smaller jobs, it's not like you throw, like I don't even have a creative resume. Sometimes you write like a little cover letter if some of them are more formal, but a lot of times it's hitting people up on Instagram in the DMs, sliding into the DMs like Parker said, and then, if they have an email that you can grab off their website, maybe doubling down and pinging them again there, just to make sure that they might get it. It's funny, like a lot of small businesses don't check their DMs from the people that they aren't connected with. It shows up, like I know on Instagram in like a different section until you accept it. So I like to try and double up. That's a quick tip for everybody out there. Try and beat them to the inbox as well.
Trying to woof them.
Yeah, woof them from the office.
Which I think we established at some point last week that we're bringing that into the real world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, not a full week in terms of getting stuff cooking, but yeah, really planned on spending the time that I wasn't camping on the creative projects anyway. So, I think today is Thursday, and we're heading into a solid 4 days of creating stuff and working on some videos for the YouTube channel and things like that. So, was really looking forward to the break and really looking forward to some of those other projects, getting them moving.
Do you feel at all that your motivation or that your energy is different after the fact?
After the camping trip, or kind of after coming off
Yeah.
a work week?
I guess like what, comparatively.
It's more exciting isn't the right way. I'm hungrier, like a little bit more ambitious to tackle things, which is good and bad, right? I think that helps me start some chunkier projects, or like maybe dig into things that I was putting off that I knew, if I only had 2 hours after work, that I wouldn't be able to get into deep enough to really feel like I was making good progress. At the same time, I do find I get a little bit more distracted. It's almost like there's so much that I could be doing or jumping into that, I do find myself probably bouncing around a little bit more on the social media sites than I normally would. And it's like helpful because it's not like it's my own social media, right? It's some of the accounts that I'm working with. But it's also not time spent like editing video or editing photos or planning future content, which is not ideal. That chunky time for me is what I should be using for some of the strategery, if you will, coming down the line. So that's the flip side, the negative that, can settle in if I have too much time on my hands. But thankfully, the positive is just having those big uninterrupted chunks of time.
Yeah. I think that trying to figure out what the appropriate amount of sort of things going on and the appropriate amount of time to stop and be strategic or think sort of big picture versus not having that time and just having to get things done in small sort of chunks. That is the single greatest challenge of adult life.
That's a hot take.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't that seem like I know for sure that the four of us do have different degrees of just willpower and sort of intrinsic motivation and abilities to focus and sort of turn that focus on. The part of the reason I think I asked the question was because if I had that week, I would feel like so energized. And then sort of like you're saying, come back to this big, huge set of things to do and just not know where even to start. I'd flail around to a bunch of different things. Do you feel that at all?
So I think to combat that, what I do, I have a whiteboard, and on that I have a couple different sections, and it's kind of broken up by personal projects and paid projects. And so like on the personal side, that very much looks like my personal YouTube channel, my hockey YouTube channel, and there's kind of like a content timeline, what I loosely want coming down in the next couple weeks. And then for the paid projects, I try to organize it more like, okay, what needs to be done soon? And then what chunk of that work is like reaching out to prospective clients or improving, like, I don't know, a website so that it's curated for sending to the next person that I was going to talk to, something like that. So I think just even having a loose, we might all be, you guys remind me, I think we all are kind of list people to some degree, but just having that loose to do is helpful enough for me to kind of stay with it. But I guess to dig into a detailed example of what I was talking about earlier. So the Create Unknown is the podcast that I'm doing some work for their socials. And that's in a different, and I was talking about bouncing around on the different social sites. Part of what will enable me to be helpful for them is getting to know that side of YouTube better. Personally, I live very much in the camera tech YouTuber space. Not that I am one, that I'm following those people. Whereas the Create Unknown really covers a lot of like the more, I don't think anybody calls this, but like quote pop culture YouTube, like kind of what's popular or what's maybe making it to like the very homepage or stuff like that. And it's very different. And I don't know a lot of that. You guys know I don't know any pop culture. And so it's like pretty similar on the YouTube front. Like I just don't know that popular YouTube stuff.
Let's make it clear to our listeners that in high school, Dan did not listen to music. Period.
Just wasn't like a thing I did.
He just didn't know what music was. We would talk about it. He worked at Center Ice in Oaks, Pennsylvania, where which is just a hockey rink, and he worked there. And the only music he knew was music they played out on the radio. I remember. Let's see,
which was rap.
Yeah. So
that's
Dan, that is
the lens
always amazing
with which I viewed, or should I say, listened to the world.
I don't even know if that's a weird thing, right? Some people are probably like, yeah, that's fine. People don't listen to music. That's fine. And of course it is fine,
I think it is pretty unusual.
It seems so weird.
To the degree, because I still don't really spend my time listening to like that much music. It's especially now really like into podcasts and go figure. But like really, I don't know, like
on repeat.
All the time that I'm trying to listen to something, I'm like trying to get some kind of learning out of it, right? It's like half edutainment, as they say, half education, half entertainment. How did I get involved with the Create Unknown? There really was no interview process. I think that's maybe one of the goals of the stuff that I'm doing, both personal and, dare I say, professional projects, is kind of helping other freelancers who are maybe dreaming of starting or haven't started yet, or like on the very beginning of their journey, understand that like you just have to start putting yourself out there. And for some people that's scarier than others. But I was a part of their Discord and was posting around, just kind of telling people like, hey, I'm into photography, shooting some remote product photography. Does anybody need anything like that? Or does anybody know of potential gigs or perhaps video editing? Didn't get a lot of response, but it is a group of people that appreciate creatives in general, like the big ones. Obviously, they're there to kind of see some of the bigger creators that we have hosted on the show, but also that are into that stuff themselves. And then one of the hosts picked up on that thread like a couple of weeks or a couple months later. And I was like, hey, are you still looking for this kind of stuff? We think we might have enough things that we need help on to kind of connect here. And so you really just kind of have to let people know what you're doing, how you might be able to help them. And it's that planning meets opportunity, right? All the while you're practicing whatever you're doing, and then when something comes up, you have something to point back and say, I have been doing this already. Can I try doing that for you? Because it's really hard to not be creating and then say, I want to do this. And then the first question is, what have you done? Right? And you just point to an empty abyss, and it's like, it's not going to go well for you in getting that gig.
Just trust me, I can do it. Just trust me. I would be curious if you don't mind taking a step back to something you were talking about earlier, about having to kind of like scroll social media and keep up with pop culture as part of kind of like what you're working on, like striking a balance. Because I know like scrolling through feeds and news and pop culture for me is something that like I struggle to keep in check, and I don't have any obligation to do it. So I'd be curious to hear what that experience is like, given that it's something you're like, it's just like a fundamental part of your work.
It's like your professional
Instagram Reddit scroller. Yeah. I don't want to look, but I have to.
Yeah. Oh man, all these memes. God, just gotta plug it. Just gotta. Yeah. What are these? What's this? What do you say about clocks? Punch.
You're You got a meme quota.
What do you say about clocks?
It's that's an old saying.
Yeah.
No one punches clocks anymore.
I did punch a clock at center ice, just to be clear. That was the only
Ooh.
physical clock I was punching.
Damn, like Fred Flintstone style.
Yeah.
So sorry. Ian asked a question.
Yes.
I'm more curious about these clocks now that you bring it up.
No, focus then.
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that, really, Ian. I feel bad, but like just kind of listening in quotes, like spending time in Discord, following some of the conversations that people are having about this stuff, or like digging into some of the memes that I'm like horribly lost on, or like so lost to the point like, oh, why is this funny? And like trying to like find the format.
It moves so fast. I swear,
Yeah,
there's
they
like
do.
I don't know how people keep up with it.
The
I guess it's a
maymays,
lifestyle.
they're always flying.
Huh,
But yeah, I just
interesting.
try to not get stuck in a loop,
Ooh, I would very much get stuck in that loop, especially if I could justify it. Like if I was like, do I really need to be doing this? Yeah, I do.
Dan, I'm interested also in. So it sounds like just tossing yourself out there is just important, and also like developing a sort of like a portfolio, basically. I'm interested in how. So I know you work with some local and some not so local coffee companies, like companies that work with coffee in different ways. How did you develop? First of all, like what are some of those things that you're working on, and then how did you develop those relationships?
So yeah, the local company that I work with is Wake Coffee, and they're an Ambler. And I think
So pretty local.
yeah, relatively, not directly in Phoenixville, but they I'm trying to remember back. I think the first interaction I was following them. So one of the things that I try to do is like just like Parker was saying, like follow the
Yeah.
local companies. And so I was trying to follow a few local roasters. And I'm not even sure, like I can't even remember why. I didn't even have a camera at this point because I remember asking them, like just getting the nerve to say like, oh, like, will you send me a bag in exchange for a picture, like a sponsored post? I think I was getting into Instagram and was starting to realize like, oh, wow, like you can grow a following and all these people are just getting all this free stuff everywhere. And, oh, wait, I have 50 followers. So this isn't going to work out. But I think I was on the verge of, like, I'd have to follow back the timestamps. I think I was on the verge of getting a camera. And so kind of as that, like, we've talked about this a lot offline, as that first step, like that faking it until you make it. That's like the classic way it's phrased. But really that super MVP type, like, is there a market for this? Or can I trick my way into this situation without knowing how to do it, right? So like I didn't have a camera. I took a photo with my phone. I think I had like they make all those aftermarket phone lenses. And so I had a macro one, and they said yes. They were small enough that like they saw the message. They were just intrigued enough, I guess, to send me a bag or two. And I took a photo, and if I can find that, I'll throw that up for the YouTube listeners. Sent them that, and then just like didn't talk to them for a while, but just kept in touch. Got a camera eventually, started shooting more and more. And then I probably hit them up again, like, hey, do you need any more work here? And I went in and talked to the owners. It's a now husband and wife duo that runs Wake in Ambler. And just had a really good conversation about what they wanted to do. And they weren't super happy with I don't know, the ability to do it all on their own. So I think they were working with a couple different photographers. And so I was able to sneak into that rotation. So I only do ad hoc stuff for them at the moment, no like ongoing weekly work. But they've been really easy to work with, and that's been really cool. And then the company that I shoot remotely for is called Bottomless, and they were a YC company. They have a scale that's actually a hardware product. And
Sorry, let me stop you. YC.
Y Combinator is like a startup accelerator. Very popular. You should know these.
Yes.
Yeah, just
No,
study up.
you don't need to know.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yes.
So they have a hardware product, and their sales pitch is it's like an Internet of Things device. You connect it to your Wi-Fi, the scale, and you place your coffee on that scale. They have a subscription service, and then as you go through your coffee, the scale is, pinging their database. Well, I don't actually know how the back end works, but I imagine it's collecting data every so often on the mass that's on the scale, and it orders you a replacement bag of coffee just in time based on the preferences that you've kind of set in on their website and created your profile. So kind of an interesting concept. I think they've grown quite a bit this year with COVID. So one of kind of the businesses that came out net positive there. I don't know if it was just because of that, but certainly it didn't hurt them. More people are ordering online. And so doing weekly work there, sending some photos, doing some social media management, and working on some video stuff. What was the second part of the question? Same thing though. Hit them up.
Lost.
Hit them up on the Instagram DM machine.
It's a lot of Hail Marys. I love that. That's I guess cold calling, or this new version of cold calling. I'm glad that is still the way to go for a lot of things.
Yeah, and some don't work. Like some are just flat out, you can tell that they have never read it because you don't get that read receipt or read receipt. You never see that juicy seen notification. And it's like, oh, that's a bummer. And then some people, like recently, I reached out to an account, Finn Coffee Club. I have a sponsored post on my channel. They have a really nice feed, and it was clear that somebody was already had some dedicated time to putting that together. But I reached out anyway and just asked them if they needed any other help, and they were good, but they were totally cool to talk with, and they sent me like this little Vietnamese coffee brewer contraption called a Finn filter, and like I went on this wormhole to read about that. They sent it to me, and it's actually like a really cool little brewing thing that I've added to my arsenal. So it's just cool to like connect with companies like that, even if it's just for a little gift, an exchange, and just learning more about, I don't know, whatever medium you're into, contacting them through. So
how do you
really cool.
How do you decide when to call it quits on a lead? Like, if you don't get that juicy read receipt, is that the end of it, or you give it a second shot, or like, what's that look like?
It's like this. It reminds me of when you're looking for a job and you're reaching out to like recruiters, or it feels very much like that. I think
Relatable.
that like idea of you kind of touched on this, Parker, like the idea of not knowing like when to hit them up again, or if even. If they don't see the message, I usually don't track them down too hard. If I'm corresponding with someone through email and they're kind of falling off, I'll try to give it a few days and then reconnect. I don't pester more than twice usually. I think, sure, there are probably situations where if you hit them a third and fourth time, you could prevail. But honestly, if they're busy enough that it's fallen through, it is what it is. I kind of just like, I can reach out again later if I want to, but frankly, running the day job and all this stuff, I'm busy too. I don't necessarily want to follow up on those things that might have a lower chance of coming through after a second and third and fourth ping anyway.
Yeah, it's hard to figure that out.
I think the other thing is like kind of knowing, even though like coming from like this is like a newer thing for you, Dan, like the content creation for other people, I think you also kind of have to know your worth.
Yeah.
Like I think it kind of like, I don't know, not degrades, but kind of like belittles what you're capable of. And like you're churning out like really good material. Like it's not like I don't think it's like
slinging
worth
content.
Chase slinging the old content, but I'm saying like you don't have to like chase somebody and like bend over backwards to like if for some reason, and this probably doesn't happen often, but there's going to be those clients where like maybe they don't follow up or something like that, and you don't have to like, I don't know, undersell yourself so much that you're like chasing them around.
It's a hard thing to figure out, like trying not to be desperate when like balancing some degree of well, this is what I want to be doing, and I got to get it started somehow. So it's like, it's hard to figure out how much to push on those things.
Very much
'Cause you-
so.
Oh yeah.
And I think the only other thing that I want to say is it is kind of scary to even just send a company like a message about like it takes a while to figure out and it is pretty scary, but you just have to like this is such dumb advice, but like you just have to
Let's
practice.
wait. Yeah,
You
here
just
we go.
okay, yeah, sit down. You got to practice.
Yeah.
And thankfully, for me that came from a long time ago in college, like sending out stuff about the apps that my middle brother and I were making. And I can tell you, like, it was painfully scary. Even to, like, post status updates on our development on social media was, like, something that I would get nervous. You just get nervous. Like, how is this received? Or, like, how are people going to receive me as a person, as somebody who's trying to build something and then market it? Like, that whole thing is so strange at first. At least it was for me. And I'm so thankful that we got into some project like that, because the second go round, this is really the second big project I've worked on since. It's just so much easier.
Mm.
Think about your
Hey,
third
hey,
career
hey,
shift.
hey,
You're gonna
hey.
have it down. Like,
Slow down.
Let's hear about what Brennan's been up to.
Okie dokie.
I'm fucking hungry for Spawn. What's up?
God, Parker, that was like the one bit of feedback, man. Come on.
Yeah, right. Less Spawn. So it's been a weird couple of weeks for me. So that notion about how much you want to nudge people is pretty raw for me at the moment. Probably like a month ago when I was confident enough. So basically, what I had done up to that point. So about a month ago, I had finished like about 2 months of these kind of experimental grows. So I was figuring out all of the different inputs necessary, all of the pricing, all of the amount of work that would go into growing X amount of mushrooms per week. So my initial goal was to make 60 a week, 60 pounds a week, which was
Damn.
which was ambitious. Yeah, it was very ambitious.
Hit us
But
with
I
some LBS.
yeah, it was like maybe 60 ounces came out. But the 2 months that I was doing that, learned a lot, of course, and like learned that I had to be comfortable uh, not getting as much as I expected, especially now that I'm still, I've been doing this as a hobby for a while, but I'm certainly not a professional at it yet. Um, and after the 2 months were up, I still had a few flushes that were coming in, and started to reach out at that point to some restaurants and some markets, sort of like we've been saying, like cold call, slide into the DMs. The thing is that these places don't tend to have that kind of social media presence. A couple of them did, but I was mostly just searching out emails and um, uh, sent things out, realized um, that I needed a lot more kind of marketing material, because it wasn't enough to just say, "Hey, I'm starting a mushroom farm in the main line area. Uh, you want some?" Because most people, I mean, I don't have. I peeled back the curtain a bit about what the restaurant industry is like when it interacts with produce makers. And so immediately heard back from, actually, the first day, maybe like 5 or 6 people. Now I tossed out like 30 emails, um, but I heard back from a lot of people, which was really, really energizing, and um, also very anxiety inducing too, just because so many of them were like, "Okay, yeah, this sounds great. I'd love to see what we can do together. Do you have a menu? Do you have pricing? Do you have like a write-up of what the company is, or descriptions of what the products are. Needless to say, I didn't have any of those things. So we had to work that stuff up. And Parker was really helpful. Like, we sort of created some stuff together to send back out to people. But what ended up happening was, and this is sort of the reason I'm talking about, like, how hard it is to nudge people, or how hard it is to figure out how much you nudge people, is that since I got back, 5 or 6 emails, I responded to all of them immediately with these, like, quickly drawn up menus, but have gotten radio silence since then.
Crickets.
Yeah. Which I felt in the moment like, man, this is not that it was too good to be true to hear back from that many people, but it was like, okay, I just have to be conscious of there being ups and downs in this whole process. And I'm not going to sort of burst my own bubble right now, but I'm gonna be a little cautious that I shouldn't expect this kind of response rate necessarily. And
Yeah,
so
when you were telling us as they were getting back to you, I mean, it was a high response rate. It was really exciting.
oh yeah, I'm just rubbing my hands together, just like laying back, just waiting for the money to roll in. So when that sort of fizzled, so it took a couple of weeks for me gradually to realize that it was like, um, these were very preliminary responses. They weren't necessarily commitments by any stretch, and that I would have to sort of pivot my attention to something that was a little more in my control. So for a couple of weeks, I was continuing to harvest mushrooms, but they were mushrooms that we ended up just having to, like, consume as a family. I have a dehydrator full of oyster mushrooms right now. If anyone wants them.
Yeah, man.
And then for a couple of weeks, I was in this wait and see pattern, like this holding pattern, just figuring out what I could do. And I eventually realized that there are a couple of things I can still do. One of which was to start developing some extracts, some mushroom medicinal extracts, which I had already sort of planned on developing anyway. And so I sort of took the lull as a hint to, yeah, pivot my attention and put some time into figuring out where I could market some of these double extracts, is what they're called. What kinds of labeling? So Parker and I, we we put it off a while, but mostly I put
Just
it off a
touch
while.
base, yeah.
But we should talk pretty soon about what the labeling should look like. And let's see. This week's sort of decided that I would sort of like post some things on some online markets, as well as maybe reach out to a couple of small health food stores to see if they'd be willing to um, make some shelf space for a small uh, unlicensed, uncertified mushroom company.
Now, did they have a lot of shelf space for that?
Let's see.
Brendan,
We'll
is there
find
like,
out.
just for like, not, I wouldn't want to say downtime because you're always growing, always kind of like moving on stuff in the back, but when you don't have like a client list right now, is there a purpose in like venturing into like a farmer's market atmosphere or something like that? Because yeah, from what I've like read, I feel like
Yes.
that's how, like, I don't know if are they called like bumper crops, like pretty much the stuff you don't use. Like, isn't that how a lot of mushroom farmers kind of like unload what they need to? I think, yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't heard that term, but yeah, I think conceptually that rings true. So, or like, is something that I've been thinking about. So, the two big places that, or the two big groups of places that I reached out to were restaurants and actually markets, which was a part of the original plan anyway. And I did actually this week heard back from one whose like response had just sort of gone silent for a bit, and she reached out to me.
Ooh.
So
Ooh.
yeah, so things, that thread's still, what is it? What's the metaphor? That flame's still
That flame's still a
alive.
flame.
Let's move
Yeah.
past it. Let's move past it.
And so I'll keep on that. She mentioned so what she does is she has a small market herself, as well as a small farm that she uses to sort of source her own. She basically has a market on her farm. And I reached out to her. She said they were getting stuff from a larger mushroom company, but that for some reason during COVID has ended. And so she mentioned she'd be excited to see what we could do together. And then in this most recent one, I think there's the urgency. Like, the reason she reached out to me this week was because she mentioned she's creating like a Thanksgiving harvest package for some of her maybe CSA members. So she asked if I had anything available right now. So this week I've put some time into creating more extracts and thinking about where to market them, how to label them, and that sort of stuff. I've got like some names and recipes for them. We'll see how that goes. But then the other bit of time I've spent just thinking about whether I could, basically responding to her and saying, yes, I do have some, because I have a little, but I don't feel like, oh yeah, I've got 100 pounds that I could toss your way if you want. But either way, hopefully that turns into something on the other end, whether I say like, I can't really source stuff right now that would be sufficient, but I'd still like to see, if we're interested in still keeping this connection, then I'll just like start a new grow and say in about 3 weeks I can give you a certain amount.
So you don't have enough lead time then to like fill her like her Thanksgiving order.
Let's see, crunch some numbers here. Let's just start. No, I mean, I have some shiitakes that are ready to fruit. Now, this would be my first flush of shiitakes. They took like way longer than I expected, which has turned out actually to be a good thing right now, because I could feasibly fruit them, which is the term for turning them from mycelium to actual mushroom bodies. I could fruit them, and I think it would be pretty good. So tomorrow I'm gonna put some time in figuring out whether that's feasible, and I'll reach back out to her today saying like, I could, if you're interested, give you some shiitakes. It wouldn't be very many. So yeah, there's just not enough lead time, especially for something like shiitakes. Oysters I could get done in 3 weeks, but that puts us in December. So.
Now, could you get a little bit squirrely and maybe like fruit your shiitakes and like buy some shiitakes just to like develop the relationship?
That's interesting. I'm not opposed to it. I don't think that that's necessarily evil. It's obviously deceptive. Um,
I mean, if you're, well, I mean, so that like I think you would be doing it effectively at a loss if I'm
yeah,
picturing the situation. So like I'm sure she would be happy to get some discount shiitakes.
yeah,
Um,
that's interesting.
Now I don't know how you feel about that morally or whatever, because everybody's got their own hangups, but
Man, isn't it tough trying to make a living when you have morals?
yeah. I mean, aren't like CEOs disproportionately psychopaths and stuff? Like you're
Does seem
definitely
to
at a
be the case.
disadvantage. And it goes back
Brennan,
to
you're a
what
CEO now.
This totally is a great segue into one of our segments about corporate corporate maligning. That's interesting. I do have to stop and think about something strategically, what the plan is, because it would be great. But if she's comfortable just saying, timing isn't great, right? She's sort of seems as though she's sort of behind the ball herself. So I would imagine she'd be understanding in that regard. But that if she were to say, like, if we can't work it out for this, then it's fine if we, I don't know, we could still have a relationship after the fact. We'll see. I got to feel that stuff out. But actually, kind of excited either way. She reached out,
A
and
win's
that
a
feels
win.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Was there anything else? No, that's it.
Awesome.
I'm done.
And that's a wrap.
Oh, Ian, you can't squirrel your way
Good
out
try,
of this one.
Ian.
Here we go. Are you ready? Ian, time to get grilled.
Oh,
Let's hear
geez.
it. What did you do this week and last week? Where do things stand? How's the money printer?
Oh, that's too many questions. You're gonna have to feed me these one at a time and slowly.
Keep adding to the fire. Are you having fun?
No, things
What
are
have
going
you
good.
learned?
Yeah, we're not going to get into all that. But no, it's going good. Definitely having fun and learning a lot. That's been kind of a lot of it is, reading, kind of taking courses online, just generally like learning about the like different instruments there are out there to trade and like what, like what strategies already exist and trying to figure out how I can kind of like, basically plagiarize my way to something that works. So, yeah. So, like, I guess
Now, I'll give you a chance to
yeah,
rephrase that if you'd like. Did you mean to say plagiarize?
I did mean to say plagiarize.
Is there any like IP on that? Or I don't know. I don't know if we have enough time here, but like I'd love to dig into what stops you from just taking something that's working. Like, what is the barrier to entry if that's something that you can do? Is that
Now,
step
real
one?
quick to clarify, you mean stops you from taking like code, like character by character and just using that? Is that what you mean, Dan?
I guess I meant more of like the abstract logic, but I don't even know if people are putting their code out there for stuff like this. Ian would know better than me.
It's a mixed bag. There's definitely people that have like open sourced solutions to this problem, so like that's a good resource. There's also like it seems like a popular thing for people in data science to write blog posts and articles and things about like their solutions to very like narrow pieces of the problem. Like turning a noisy like price fluctuation time series type thing into something that's a little bit more like smooth or has like a little bit more of like a well-defined signal that you can use to like start making decisions. So
Yeah.
that's
That's
cool.
super interesting
Yeah.
because like separate from even just buying and selling anything, there's like a reporting utility to that in any kind of like data reporting. You could take any data that's all over the place and say like I want this graph to look cleaner.
Yeah,
That could be the use case even if it was just superficial as that.
yeah. I mean that's kind of one of the like tangential things that appeals to me about this project is like I've been kind of curious about the whole like data science space for a while. Like just those problems seem interesting. And so as well as like this potentially being like a way to generate income, it could be like a segue into like a little bit of a career hop if it ends up like panning out and I do end up liking it the way I think I'm gonna. So yeah, definitely the skills that like are useful for this kind of thing are like more generally applicable, I think, is like kind of like data science-y, like reporting kind of insights generation skills, which is cool.
So what kind of study? So it sounds like, of course, you're like grabbing things broadly, but you mentioned textbooks, right?
Yeah, it's been kind of like a mixed bag. So there's definitely a few textbooks that I've been working my way through. Those are cool as a reference, but they're generally kind of like dense to read cover to cover. So to like supplement,
You don't want to just sit down and read front to back an entire textbook.
dude, I wish I was that smart and academically inclined, but as you guys know, I'm not. So like it's cool. It's cool to have them as a reference for sure. Like a couple of them have useful formulas or like go kind of in the weeds on like how to do certain things. But like to supplement, I've really been leaning on some of the more like layman's terms, like online resources, and then also kind of more how-to books, like that genre. Um, to kind of like I don't know, coddle my less capable brain into like a
Hey,
vague understanding of how
hey
this
now.
stuff works. Uh,
If there's a common theme to like our attitudes towards this whole thing, it is for sure A, that we have that we doubt ourselves big time.
oh yeah,
And B, that yeah, I mean like sometimes you gotta get a little shisty.
yeah,
You
yeah.
gotta plagiarize, baby.
Yeah, and like especially like
No, not this. I don't like the P word.
now I say plagiarize kind of facetiously because
I know,
that was
but
Yeah,
like when
yeah.
we were growing up, everyone says, "Oh, you can't plagiarize. Like you're not going to be able to like recycle stuff effectively." And that's most of my job is like recycling solutions that other people have come up with. They're like, I guess more broadly, I don't think anybody does anything in a vacuum. Like everything anybody does is
Yeah.
built on top of like the work of others, and
Oh
so
yeah.
it just feels like
Demystify this whole authorial whatever.
yeah. So like I get like you definitely want to credit other people when it's appropriate and like but also like I don't know, like I kind of dropped the whole notion of like you have to do everything on your own or it's like stealing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is a really important takeaway if anyone can benefit at all from listening to this, which is certainly up for debate. But that you've got to have partners in some respect, and you've got to take some of the sort of like nobody. There is no entrepreneur who has um, just sort of cut their way through the field all the way to the end alone.
But I feel like that myth exists.
Oh, it absolutely exists, and that's why I'm that's why
Harping on it.
yeah, yeah. So I don't think it
Yeah.
should exist.
maybe we can dig into that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that I for year well let's see. So we can speak generally and specifically whatever. So, but personally, so much of what has kept me from taking certain steps in trying to like create um, essentially my own projects and create an independence. So much of that barrier is caught up in this notion that um, it's just a matter of putting your uh, head down, getting to work, and going and going and going. And um, I, because I had this notion that I just had to create something. In this case, say it's like growing these mushrooms. I basically was ignoring the entire communal aspect of things, which is partly a motivating thing that like I was just putting myself in this in the driver's seat completely and like I was the only one in control of anything I was doing and that was actually boring and tiring and so I was ignoring the usefulness of telling other people what's going on and like reaching out to other people and asking for help because that really is useful. And also just speaking to other people is motivating for me at the very least. Um, and then the other thing is that like I don't know. Um, the idea that Steve Jobs created a new vision for the world and just like pooped it out of his head and it was there and beautiful. I think is really damaging to people who get uh, to people who might get discouraged by their failures or by their um, lack of luck in some cases. So I don't know if that's an articulate answer so much as I just think the notion that there is um, any business person who is crazy successful in a vacuum, like Ian said, I think is kind of problematic.
Yeah, that helps. That context helps me understand what you're like. Certainly, thinking that you can be Steve Jobs archetype alone is asinine. But
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of like very successful solopreneurs, and you can. And this is not to say that I don't love the communal aspect, or even that I don't love doing stuff like this and just talking about it. But like, the stuff that we're doing individually toward the projects, I don't know if you consider the podcast like a communal part of that, but
Yeah.
really we're all still working solo for
Right.
a
Yeah.
lot
But
of
I
it.
think like,
And there, especially in the software space, a ton of people that do get to be super successful on like the digital products all alone because they're also good designers, right?
right. And I think maybe to amend what I was saying before, like getting partners, what I mean by that is gathering partners in a bunch of different ways. Like maybe it's actually reaching out to people and asking for their help or asking for them to like uh, pair up with your brand or your
Gotcha. Okay.
project. Or maybe it is gathering a community that you talk about this stuff with, like we're doing right now, and
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
just keeping yourself accountable to people and making it, building in public, right? And then the other thing I think is, or the other way that you could say, quote unquote, you're like gathering partners is by uh, using, standing on the shoulders of people who have already done stuff. So sort of, relevant, we're derailing Ian's conversation, or like
It's all
relevant to
good.
what Ian was talking about, right? Or
Using
in
Google.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. There's no reason not to, and to act like you can or should create something like fully out of thin air is um, probably, at least I felt crippling in my early stages of trying to figure out how I can create some sort of independence.
I think like,
Yeah, that makes
oh,
sense.
sorry. I was gonna say just like how do you gauge your success too? It's like I don't know because everything's so, especially like on these four different fields. Like me and Dan's, I guess is kind of similar, but even that's probably different. Like you're saying, like a Steve Jobs thing. That's not. I don't know if that's super. I don't know if like I know we're all taking over the world actually, but like, are we? I don't know.
Yeah, do you mean like something about there's not so much, like that may not necessarily be
Yeah,
what people
exactly. Like I
want
don't.
even?
Yeah, a bit. I just like I think that like just being self sufficient is like successful to some people, whereas like being overly self
Yeah.
sufficient to other
Yeah.
people is a success. Like it's almost like being braggy is what I would probably align closer to Steve Jobs with. Like are you going to have this keynote speech
Mm.
once a year where everybody listens to you and what you say is paramount? Like that's somebody's success, like maybe, but
Mm.
like are you planning on moving up to upstate Vermont and getting away from life, but being able to do that because of the things that you created? That's like another form of success. I don't know, but that's like its own
Yeah.
conversation. We can do that next week.
And I don't want to say, I don't mean to say that things cannot be done by one person, right? Dan, you mentioned like there are
Yeah,
examples of like solopreneurs, I think you said, right?
Well, I
yeah.
would like
Um,
to clarify that a little bit. Like, would you mind describing, Dan, what you mean by that, or like what kind of person you're thinking of when you say like doing something fully solo?
Yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned it on here yet, but one of the communities that I follow is called Indie Hackers. It's like one of those podcasts, very software based and kind of around SaaS and one off products. And a lot of the success stories there are very solo. So it's it with a strong programming background, especially if like I see that archetype of being half software developer, half designer. You can I don't even want to say you can get very far. Like you alone can build some highly successful product,
Yeah.
which is really cool for those people. It's not me,
yeah.
you know. And I think that is kind of a domain that is more ripe for making it that far alone. I think it is much harder if you're like, I don't know, farming or growing mushrooms, or like there's just so many more local relationships. I think that's going to be a theme that's pretty big with at least like my stuff, Parker's stuff, Brendan's stuff. I don't know how many local like businesses that you'll connect with over the course of this, but that's a different domain. I think yours relates closer to very much, I guess I was thinking of it in a narrow aspect too, right? So like thinking about the community or doing this podcast is something, if that counts as doing things together, that's broader than, what I initially thought. But like for Ian, most of your stuff I imagine is going to be relatively solo, right?
Yeah, well, so I'll say...
So standing on that knowledge as the exception.
Yeah, well, I'll go further though, and I think I want to disagree a little bit with that notion of like, even if you build something quote unquote on your own, like the only reason that that's possible today is because there's been so much work done in the field to like kind of create these abstractions and things that you can build on top of, and like so.
Yeah.
If you publish an app to the App Store, like the only reason that you have access to that marketplace is because like all of these teams of people have created it for you. And so like I think that's just what I struggle with when I hear the like the solo thing is like, yes, you can do things independently, but only because like all of these like extraordinarily complex systems have already like been built out and are there for you to take advantage of. And that's kind of how I see myself with all that. Like I wouldn't be able to do this if there hadn't been so much work put in, like by all these people that are open sourcing their things, but then also like the people who built these like brokerage APIs and like, all the people that have built these open source libraries that I'm using. And like, it's just, there's such an immense mountain of things underneath me that like, even though I'm doing this little bit on my own, it's that quote about standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, nobody gets where they are in a vacuum. And I don't know, I guess I just wanted to call attention to that if you'll have it.
I'll have it. I love that. I love how humble that is. And I love how true that is too. But at the same time, when you think of that as a business, from a business standpoint, however humble you're going to be there and how little credit you're trying to take for yourself, at the end of the day, that is infrastructure, and then like you are the sole employee. You're not even the employee, you're the founder. You have 0 employees. Yeah. So like in a real, not a real, that's the wrong word. In like in the eyes of corporate entities, like you are doing this solo hardcore. But I think that is like aligning with my worldview. The way that you've described is like that's kind of why we're having these conversations, right? That's how we would like to live in a world where everybody has that top of mind, that they're not here due to their own doings themselves, right? That there is empathy for all the work that people have put in to create the infrastructure that enables anybody to do cool things locally on the internet, what have you, right? So that is, Ian, that's lovely.
Cool. And now that's a wrap.
Yeah, okay. So that updates everybody on where we stand. It seems like good 2 weeks or week and a half or so, right?
Yeah, man, I'm loving it.
Right.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hey, we're gonna get dinged for that.
Yeah.
just splice in the goat sound straight over that one.
No, they'll
Too
love
many
the
notes
free
were shared
advertising.
there.
Cool. So I guess then that is a wrap, right? Ian already said it. Yeah, that's a wrap. So let's see. Tune in next week. We'll dive into a bit more about our background, how we got to where we are, our education. I think sometimes it can be important
or
for
lack
folks
thereof.
Exactly right. Yeah. Again, if the themes here are that like you know, sometimes you got to be shiesty and be super humble. That's right in line. We'll talk about, I think, some of us meandering paths, some of us more meandering, some of us less meandering paths to where we are now, because no journey is all that straight, right?
Amen, brother.
So tune in next week to find out exactly how meandering.
Yes, please. Y'all have a good week.
For Steve and Lynda, I'm Brendan.
I'm Dan.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Parker.
We'll catch you later. Ba-da-ba-da-boop, boop, boop. Ba-da-ba-da-boop, boop, 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 boop.